This is the Hermetic Hour. I'm your host, Poke Runyon, and tonight we present a review of the new book, The Universal Master Key, alleged to be a newly discovered manuscript by the late Franz Bardon. Now, this book is actually a reconstructed series of lectures by Bardon to his students on mastering and balancing the four Hermetic elements in the personality as set forth. I said the first section, but it's actually the second section of his book, Initiation into Hermetics. The texts of the lectures are rewritten from a collection of class notes by the students and rendered in Bardon's writing style by his publisher and editor, Dieter Ruggeberg. The book is published by Faulks Books, which mistakenly represents it on the internet as taken from a newly discovered manuscript by Franz Bardon. However, it does not appear to be entirely a hoax. Now, if Dieter wrote the entire book, he has at least mastered Bardon's style and philosophic attitudes. The book is certainly worth a place in a magician's Bardon collection. It is very moralistic and sermonizing in tone, with a strong emphasis on ethics and spiritual integrity. It has its shortcomings. It was supposed to be organized according to the qualities of each element, but it's Dieter doing Bardon, seems to go off the track into a general discussion on how to live and die well in this and higher worlds. So if we want to revisit the Bardonian internal tetragrammaton process, then stay with us and we'll go to a Hermetic Sunday school with Reverend Franz. And next week we will revisit the Bavarian Illuminati. Now, I want to say this, make another correction here, that Dieter did organize this book into four sections, one for each one of the Hermetic elements. However, as you know, what he did, he took the different qualities attributed to the elements, as mentioned in Initiation into Hermetics, and he, took the lectures, and I imagine that Bardon had somehow or other tagged these lectures in that manner, but they, in order to really set this properly, what we really ought to do is go to Initiation in Hermetics, and the section. It's in section 2, soul training, and what he refers to is making psychic magic mirrors. Now, I brought along, this again is one of Dieter's projects, I brought along the 1999 second translation of Initiation into Hermetics. And frankly, I don't think that the section on magic mirrors in here is as detailed as it was in the earlier translation, because I started going through it, and also I brought along my own journal from back in '83 when I started doing these soul mirrors on the weighting the qualities of the elements, negative qualities and positive qualities, and weighting them and comparing them, and then trying to correct them as Bardon has you doing this exercise. And I'm looking at of course, this is the second translation. I don't think the second translation, I think there's something maybe missing here about the way you should weight the elements, because I know in my journal I've got a numerical weighing system for actually weighing these elements, and I don't see it in here. But here's as he gets into this, he starts talking about the qualities. I'm talking right now. I'm not looking at the new book. I'm looking at for those of you who happen to have that new Mercure 1999 edition of Initiation into Hermetics. Fire element. Negative qualities first: quick temper, jealousy, hate, vengefulness, anger. And then the air element: thoughtlessness, boastfulness, self-conceit, gossip, wastefulness. Water element: indifference, apathy, cold-heartedness, acquiescence, carelessness, shyness, defiance, and inconsistency. And the earth element: being easily offended, laziness, irresponsibility, ponderousness, melancholy, inconsistency. Okay, those are the negative qualities. Now let's talk about the positive qualities. And you weigh these against each other. When you create these two, this black and this white mirror, the negative mirror being the black one and the positive mirror being the white one. And when you create these, go through this exercise, you weigh these elements against each other and see which one you have a preponderance of. That's why this weighting scale, which I believe he has in the first, they have in the first edition of this book. I don't see it here, but that weighting scale is important. Okay, the fire element: positive, activity, enthusiasm, determination, daring, courage. And the air element: diligence, joy, proficiency, kind-heartedness, propensity to work, and optimism. Water element: humbleness, modesty, abstinence, ardency, compassion, tranquility, peace, and forgiveness and tenderness. Earth element: respect, perseverance, conscientiousness, thoroughness, circumspection, soberness, prudence, punctuality, and a sense of responsibility. And then he says, through these exercises, you will attain 2 astral soul mirrors, one black, which represents all your negative astral characteristics, and one white, with your good and noble character traits. These 2 magic mirrors are considered to be actual occult mirrors, and no one but the proprietor has the right to view himself in these mirrors. In other words, you don't want to show this to anybody. I should mention again that it is very important that the proprietor of these mirrors must work very conscientiously and precisely on them so that the final result is a true magic mirror. And should you, in the course of your development, encounter any more good or bad, positive or negative characteristics, add them to your existing records. These 2 magic mirrors give the magician the ability to accurately determine which element in the black or white is predominant. This knowledge is absolutely necessary in order to reach your magical equilibrium. All your future development depends on it. Now, this is very important to in Franz's training program. I remember I did it back in '83, and I'm looking at my little charts. And one thing, though, that I want to mention in criticism of both Bardon's initiation into Hermetics and also this commentary on the elements, this master key, is that one of the things the Hermetic magician should do, and is, he should work this system and the mirrors with his natal horoscope, or her natal horoscope. This should be essential, because as we have said many, many times, and I think Bardon would agree, that astrology, which is broken up into the 4 elements, as Hermetic elements, as we know, and the cardinal signs, and all that, and astrology is the master key, and so the person's natal chart would be the master key. And as we all know, we not only use astrology as for our own makeup and our own development, but we have a branch of astrology called elective astrology, which is magical, where you actually use astrology in magical operations and in talismans and everything else. And so this is one of the failings from a Hermetic point of view in Bardon's training program, in both the initiation into Hermetics and in the master key. So that said, we got a new book that just came out, because we're starting to develop our astrology course for our associate members and for our regular members. And one of our one of our members in Alabama, who is quite a scholar, and that's Fraterolphus, has suggested that for an initial book that everybody ought to read, I got Zandria, who our astrologer. Oh, there, she's just handed it to me. This is one that we're going to recommend. I know Fraterolphus recommends it, and I agree. And we look through it, and we realize this is the book that you all need, and right along with doing Bardon's mirrors, you should get this book and look at your own horoscope from a hermetic and elemental point of view, astrological element point of view. It's the Wiser Concise Guide to Practical Astrology by Priscilla Costello. You know, like Costello, like Abbott and Costello. Priscilla Costello. And I could mention, it's edited by James Wasserman, who we happen to know. Now, this is a book that will really give you a good handle on natal astrology, and of course, and it'll give you from there you will have a background, so you can go on and study the books by Christopher Warnock on magical astrology and whatever, and you'll be off in the right direction. And as I said, as I pointed out, this is one of the things that's lacking, of course, in Bardon's program, and I don't think you should really start into your magic mirrors, which we're going to talk about. We're going to be reading some and commenting on some of Bardon's stuff or Dieter's version of Bardon in the Universal Master Key. Now, what is the Universal Master Key? Okay, well, it is a series of lectures on the positive and negative qualities that we just read out in Initiation into Hermetics that apply to these elements. And I think, as I said, the style is definitely Franz Bardon. You read this and you feel like you're listening to Bardon. I had a very good friend who's passed away a few years ago, and it's John Dan Reeb, and he was an English teacher over at Pasadena City College, and John was also a magician and an occultist in his own right, and really enjoyed Bardon. He used to read Franz Bardon to his freshman English class in a thick German accent. So I'm going to give this a bit of a try. Anyway, here in memory of John's business with Bardon. What I'm going to do to really give you an idea of this and how it goes, I'm going to read positive attribute for each one of the major elements. And I'll read it right from the Universal Master Key. Okay, so let's start off with fire and the positive attributes. And number 1, will, might, and power. The will is an almighty attribute, whereas might and power are part of the will, which God the Creator gave us when He created us in His image. The will is the fundamental might and power through which our immortal spirit can create, control, dominate, preserve, and destroy everything. All of creation represents the attribute of the will, which consists of both quality and power, and which, when combined together, forms quantity. The quality of the will is merely the intent to achieve or accomplish something, which are possible without the necessary power. And that is why, in cases like that, it remains just volition. The power of the will is the quantity through which we can create, achieve, and realize whatever we wish. With that, we can control and grasp everything that we target and plan to do. We control all the elements, mainly with the will. with which we can create everything. For example, elementals, elementaries, and other beings of the elements. And with the help of the will, we can control and dominate all the beings that belong to the visible and invisible world, and furthermore, all powers of the elements or forces of nature. Through the will, we mainly control the attributes of the elements, including our own passions and bad habits, as well as those of our fellow men. We never interfere with our fellow human beings, of course, in accordance with our level of development. It matters that are in matters that are caused by their destiny. I'll repeat that again. We never interfere in accordance with our level of development in matters that are caused by their destiny. We are able to move mountains through the positive will of the Spirit in unison with belief. We can operate with quite a few aspects of the will, such as the visual, sight, the acoustic, hearing, sentient, feeling, olfactory, smell, and taste concentration. Furthermore, with the imagination, that is to say, through the power of the imagination, we can clearly envision everything we create on all planes. We use the will for every magical exercise, work, and task. And through our will, we receive our independence, and that is also the reason why we should never be subordinate to other people when it is uncalled for. Of course, we must be subordinate to our superiors in our profession or work, or as a soldier. In that case, it is necessary to show obedience because destiny has placed us there. In critical moments, the will serves us as a decision factor to show us what has to be done in situations like that. In such cases, we can depend on our will, which is connected with our intuition and inspiration. We see another aspect of the will in our egotism and the endeavor to preserve our own present life for the longest possible time, especially when it is well-founded and properly established with the magical path we have taken. Our survival instinct forces us, in a case of danger, to a supreme effort of all our energies to save our own life, come what may, and as far as destiny allows it. Our will also expresses itself in the fight for survival. In our profession, to achieve a better standard of living, we must always take the interests of our fellow man into consideration, that we do not harm them, and we always take a cue from how destiny has arranged our life for us. We know that destiny knows best what is harmful and what is beneficial for us. This is why we employ our goodwill where it is appropriate, where we do not harm anyone, and also for our own welfare. And we never use or misuse our will, and also never in cases where the universal laws are violated. Deliberately control our astral and physical bodies, which are our shells, instruments with which we play in accordance with our wishes and according to the goodwill, and we are their guiding force. And we keep them alive during the entire time of our life on this material plane. Without our spirit, these two shells would decompose into their original substances of the elements from which they were created. We use the power of the will exclusively for noble purposes. That is, in cases like these: 1, for one's own conviction; 2, for noble deeds, namely to provide well-founded help for people in need; 3, for one's own defense when attacked and in danger of our life, to control our negative attributes, passions, and bad habits, negative thoughts, impressions, pictures, etc. We must cultivate our will in a magical manner, since it will truly become omnipotent for us. And on this particular level of development, we will take it with us into the invisible world. We become conscious of the fact that we imitate the Akasha through the will and identify ourselves in this manner with the will. The will has its seat in the head, and it is effective practically in the electromagnetic fluid in all the planes. That gives the positive. That's the most positive and the most assertive aspect of the fire element, according to Franz's catalog here of attributes, both attributes and detriments, both active and negative. Now, understand that Franz Bardon is, as I said, is very definitely a moralist. He is, and also too, he has no problem synthesizing Eastern philosophy with what we might call Rosicrucianism, because Bardon is at his root, he is definitely a Christian, and he often falls back on Jesus for supportive quotes and whatever, and so he's definitely, but he also is, as you can gather with his use of the term akasha and the way he talks about the tattwas and all this, he is very much influenced by Reform Hinduism. And I say Reform Hinduism because that's what was behind Theosophy, and Bardon is, well, according to Dieter, Bardon was very much was a follower of Rudolf Steiner. Now, other people who are into Bardon don't agree with that, but Dieter, I think knows really more about what Bardon was really involved in than just about anybody else. And that's what Dieter says, is if you really want to understand what's behind Bardon, then read Steiner. Well, I have, and I think Dieter, maybe you're right. And Steiner, of course, broke from Blavatsky, as you remember, because he wanted to, the same as Anna Kingsford, he wanted to have more Christianity in magic and in mysticism. Blavatsky was somewhat anti-Christian. So I think Dieter, maybe you're right on that Steiner's anthroposophy is probably what may be behind a lot of Bardon's beliefs. All right, so that's the fire. Now we have the good side of the fire element there, and you get a little taste of Bardon's style. Let's skip over here to, let's see, the element of air. And the element of air, positive attributes, the joy of living. That sounds almost Chinese, I know. Oh, it was Lin Yutang wrote a book called The Joy of Living. We know that joy of life is a sign of good health. When we are in possession of it, we are optimistic and we see everything in glowing colors. Nothing offends us, chains or burdens us. And for example, worries, pains, sufferings, pessimism, rage, troubles, strife, annoyances, spitefulness, envy, hate, insults, grief, or sorrow, stinginess, or similar negative attributes. We pay no attention to their effects, and on the contrary, we enjoy everything, and rightly. So, for we know that everything belongs to nature and is sacred. I'm going to make a comment on that. Things were really going terrible and terrible and terrible. So somebody said, "Cheer up, things could be worse." And so we cheered up, and sure enough, things got worse. Okay, but Martin would say, "Cheer up anyway." Okay. On the contrary, we enjoy everything, and rightly so far as we know that everything belongs to nature. It is sacred, to a certain degree pure, and depending on its significance and development, wise, agreeable to us, no matter if we like it or not. Oh boy, it only hurts when I laugh. Nothing in this world exists or happens without a reason. Everything has been created for a particular task, and that includes us human beings. And because of that, And for the simple reason that we were born on this material plane, that is why we should enjoy it. Because our temporary life brings us here, brings us mood, luck, namely the opportunity for self-knowledge. And this significant circumstance has an inestimable value. Our destiny has prepared us for various kinds of surprises and some rare opportunities. For this small amount of time, for this moment in eternity on this earth. And we learn to gather information from these experiences. And we make every effort to comprehend them in the real, innermost sense of the word and develop our character accordingly, our future destiny. And you remember that movie, The Master, where Dowd gets out there and says, I found the secret of everything. Laughter. No matter what it is, laugh at it. Okay. This is the most beautiful reason and the best of good luck that can happen to us on the material plane, which we can honestly enjoy the most. But to our great regret, we must discover that the majority of people are pessimistic about their lives and worldly affairs because they have not realized the true reason why they live here, and they thus make no effort to rid themselves of negativity. Negative forces have taken hold of their position in the material plane. And who of these kinds of people can sincerely enjoy life, since they do possess nothing to lean on with which to clearly recognize their mistakes? And when the causes of their mistakes were they themselves. And although they can rid themselves of these circumstances, feelings, points of view, opinions, ailments, and failures that cling to them everywhere and torture and pursue them, they must first recognize them and replace them with the opposite attributes, perceptions, circumstances, and pleasing good ideas and images. The truth is that everyone causes everything himself, the good and the bad, and it depends entirely on him how he lives his life. He cannot complain when someone harms him, hates him, slanders him, harasses him, or takes revenge on him, anything but. Every person causes all these things through his thoughtlessness, ill-considered deeds, thoughts, passions, and by succumbing to or being defeated by his negative attributes that blind him so directly that he is completely unaware of it. He is not mature enough yet to recognize their educational quality and enjoy and take great pleasure in them. I want to take issue with that in a minute. In accordance with the truth, life is, when we look at it from the perspective of the universal laws, and that is why we should enjoy it. And even if we are comforted by many things, and the positive and the negative, because everything is universal. And all these things educate us for the best purpose. And we learn to know ourselves. And surely, slowly but surely, every person must at some time come to this point in his or her development in the eternal cycle of life. And the earlier it happens, the better it is for him or her. Through that, he or she will be spared much suffering, grief, and worry in this temporary life here on earth. Only the one who knows all these problems of life, thusly lives through them and possesses a genuine joy of life, which is eternal and never leaves him. And in order to attain real joy, he must get to know and experience the rights and the wrongs of our life. Now, let me make a little comment on that. And I think later on in this, because I just about gotten all the way through this book, I think Bardon, in further on, he kind of reverses himself on this, and he realizes that person can be righteous and fair and honest with another person and help them and everything else, and then have that individual turn on them just like a rattlesnake and bite them. And then you listen to this other person and they go on and on and on and on talking about how this righteous and helpful and charitable individual who tried to help them and tried to do all these things for them was actually trying to manipulate them and cheat them. And we have seen that recently in our relations with certain people, and I find it absolutely, I find it disgusting. And I'm not saying I'm a very righteous person. I'm really not. I'm not that righteous. I'm talking about a person I know who is a very righteous individual, who is a very helpful and a very charitable and a very kind individual, and did not deserve whatsoever for the very people he was trying to help and trying to do things like. So I don't agree with Bardon on this. I think sure it's great to laugh about your misfortunes if you can do it, and especially I was just talking about this with one of our members who's a fellow that's been through a lot of the military training and everything that I have, and perhaps more. And you're talking about the business of no matter how bad it gets, you're gonna if you live through it, you're gonna laugh about it. And the best example of this in literature is Moby Dick. Is after they get in, after they come aboard after having almost drowned, and they managed to get to kill the whale, but the whale almost killed them, and they're all trying to get warm and trying to get dry and everything, and they're all laughing their heads off. And the Ishmael, which is his first experience like this, he says, "What are you guys laughing about?" And one of the old harpooners turns around and says, "Well, we don't laugh, we go crazy." And so this is, no matter how bad it gets, see if you can laugh at it. That I will go along with. But Bardon's wrong when he says that whatever, that people, they take revenge on you, or it's not necessarily that you deserve it. They say you do, but that's not necessarily the case. Now, so that's the best of the error element is no matter how bad it gets, cheer up, it could be worse. So we cheered up, and sure enough, it got worse. Okay. Now, we need to get to the water element. Where's the water element here? What's good about the water element? Positive attributes, kindness and noble-mindedness. Okay. We can recognize a good-natured and noble-minded person through his or her deeds. Why is he good and noble-minded? Because he's not an egotist. This basically means that he thinks of himself last and instead thinks of his fellows first. Those are truly deserving. He worries little about himself because he knows only too well that his destiny will carefully take care of his modest needs. His destiny knows with certainty what he needs and what is indispensable for him in his future. Kindheartedness and noble-mindedness are not only expressed by giving material gifts of donations, for example, clothing, shoes, food, and other necessities of life, but also spiritual and astral help, wise lessons, advice, healing, protection from disaster and in all emergencies, and where we are asked to help by our fellow men. A noble-minded person always deals with everyone honestly and sincerely and from a universal point of view. In that, he puts his own interests, his personal I last. He does his utmost to put himself into the shoes of the one asking for help, and deals with him as if he were his best friend. And he directly identifies himself with the suffering person, with his spirit and soul, and in this manner recognizes best whether or not he can karmically help that human being. Of course, he should never help someone who asked for help for purely egotistical reasons. The best and most beautiful way for a person to express his kindness and magnanimity is when he secretly helps a needy person. That is genuine kindness and good-naturedness, which make a noble-minded person truly happy. In such cases, his help is effective and surprising, for he truly imitates divine providence faithfully. For she generously provides for those in need and never asks anything in return, and never reveals her identity either. And those who receive this kindness think of it as lucky, and rightfully so. But it is up to them how they deal with these gifts of kindness, either for their own good or an advantage, or to their detriment. Of course, divine providence is the most kind-hearted and noble-minded of all, who rears and educates a person through the effects of the positive and negative attributes. During these battles, a person becomes stronger and thus becomes cognizant of his good and bad attributes, his powers and energies, his soul's entire character, so that he can become noble-minded, kind-hearted, and magnanimous in accordance with his good will. Everyone needs help, but in different ways. One person is satisfied with a good word and admonition or advice that provides him with the knowledge of his errors. A noble-minded and kind-hearted person proceeds in accordance with this cognition of the absolute truth. All right, so that's pretty much shared. Now, in another place, Bardon says, and is cognizant, the idea of giving money to a beggar who you know is going to immediately take the money and go and buy alcohol with it, and he uses that as an example of how not to be charitable. And that, of course, is a very a very good reflection on some of the sort of things that go on in this country today with people that are receiving handouts even from the government and using the money for the wrong, not to feed their children or whatever, but for something else. Now, finally, to the element of earth, positive attributes. Cling to nothing transitory. When a human being makes it clear to himself that his life here on earth is merely temporary, and that he must leave behind everything he possesses, including his physical body, and when the moment of his crossing over from the material plane into eternity arrives, even with his healthy intellect, he should easily comprehend that he should not cling to anything material, and that includes his own physical life. And in the course of his transitory life, he has gathered certain experiences, as, for example, accumulating wealth, which eventually becomes nothing. And for this reason, he comes to the correct conclusion, namely, that nothing belongs to him and that he is merely an administrator of these possessions that he had on loan temporarily. And today, he has them, and tomorrow he loses them. Or, in other words, he departs from this material plane without taking a penny with him. Now, all material things serve us merely as a means to maintain our physical life, and they are not the main goal of our life here on earth. We should not exclusively devote our life to accumulate material possessions, to maintain the might, power of fame, and of all the things that the material plane has to offer. That would be a big mistake. Unfortunately, the majority of the people in this world establish their life on purely material possessions, which they accumulate until their death. And in the end, they have become one with their material possessions and are attached to them. And destiny gives some people possessions in abundance so that they can learn their true value. But usually, that does not happen until the time of their departure from the physical world. You know, remember in the 1980s, we had this philosophy, he who dies with the most toys wins, he wins the game. Well, yeah, he's taking issue with that, and I don't blame him. A well-balanced human being, of course, uses these things wisely for the preservation of his transitory life, but mainly to ennoble his spirit, his soul, and his physical body. He is not at all attached to material possessions because he knows that nothing belongs to him. And by attaching himself exclusively to material things, his spiritual development is at risk. The best remedy for one is to free himself from the dependency of transitory material means, is the clear recognition and becoming acquainted with the invisible world where entirely different conditions prevail. Above all, the finer surroundings without time and space, nothing physical. We are absolutely free there in the invisible world and independent of everything that binds and attracts us to the physical plane. However, we become completely accustomed to the physical plane during our repeated reincarnations. And that is the reason we cannot easily free ourselves from it. On the material plane, we learn the complete nullity of material things in compassion to eternity, which we only comprehend through the innermost self-cognition in accordance with our level of development. Finally, whoever has reached the point that he realizes he is basically an eternal spirit embedded in the material plane, in the astral and physical body, and that it is he who vitalizes these shells with his vital energy, attributes, and abilities. And for the simple purpose that he can express himself with these transitory shells on the material plane, he will never again cling to his physical and astral bodies, which, without the presence of his spirit, immediately dissolve into their original elements, from which they were created. He will also cling less to everything material which serves him for his transitory life. We must always remember that this transitoriness, which ties us in one way or another, stops any further steps forward in our development on the path into eternity. Well, okay, Madonna called herself the material girl, and no sooner did she get that established than she took off to the Kabbalah Center and bought herself a wheelbarrow load 23 volume set of the Zohar, which I assume she still dips into occasionally. So much for the material girl. But anyway, there's a really good point there. I do though enjoy magical tools. Magical tools are kind of a material weakness I have, and I think they look good on the astral. And I think the collection of magical tools, which I intend to leave to my successors, and a nice collection of magical tools and temple furniture and all that, those sort of things, I think Bardon might make an exception. And so that gives us a pretty good example of his, I want to call it moralizing, but I do think that it is certainly, he's certainly right that the spiritual integrity and honesty and fair dealing with your friends, your associates, and people in general is a very good idea for a magician. And I think the idea that we started off with, and the balancing of the elements, and the creation of those two mirrors. So I do think, in final analysis, I think that this Universal Master Key book, if you're going to do the Bardonian black and white mirrors of the elements, I think this Universal Master Key book is a good thing to read when you're going through those elements and cataloging them all in your personality. But I also think it's a good idea for you to have a good grasp on your natal horoscope when you do this, because all of the cardinal signs, and this is the planets and of course the planets and the signs of the zodiac, they are all connected to the four elements, and that's four elements, of course, are the tetragrammaton. They are that's air, earth, fire, water, father, mother, son, daughter. That's as close as that's pretty close to God. So I think that this Universal Master Key is a worthwhile book, and it should be on your Bardonian bookshelf along with initiation into Hermetics and magical evocation and the key to the true Kabbalah. Let me mention that key to the true Kabbalah of Bardon's. Bardon had a profound knowledge of the old grimoires. He was very familiar with Agrippa, of course, and very familiar with the Megaton and Picatrix and whatever. His key to the true Kabbalah, I believe, is it's kind of a Europeanized version or Rosicrucianized version of the Sefer Raziel. And the Sefer Raziel has a bunch of these short formulas in it, and you'll find the key to the true Kabbalah. Bardon, I think, used the Sefer Raziel as a model for this. So these little short Kabbalistic formulas that you use, he put them all into a German alphabet, which is a little bit difficult. I wish he kept them in Hebrew so we could transpose them into Phoenician. But the idea, but however, just to give you an example of the worth of that book, Key to the True Kabbalah. Bardon says in there, I'm going to tell you the secret of pronouncing the fourfold name. In other words, the name of God, the secret for pronouncing, well, what the Jewish Kabbalists would call YHVH, and what we use Shama or Masha'o. In other words, it's the four letters that represent the elements and spirit. Now, the important thing about what Bardon has in the Key to the True Kabbalah, he says this: in order to fully pronounce the fourfold name, and of course, if you can fully pronounce it, then you can move mountains, and you can accomplish anything. Well, at least that's what he says anyway. Or that's what. Now, here's his secret to this: you pronounce the fourfold name in all four worlds of the Kabbalah simultaneously. You visualize them in the colors of the four worlds, the color scales. And in this case, Bardon is not a golden daughter, but this is really what he's referring to is the Golden Dawn type color scales for all four worlds. So his formula, his master formula for pronouncing the fourfold name, really kind of depends on the Golden Dawn Minutum Mundum. It actually does, and to make it work. And so you need to be able to. So you need to be able to visualize, and you can do it if you practice it. You can visualize it, and you can intone it, and you can do it. Now, I'm not saying I've moved a mountain lately, but at least I was able to visualize and intone the fourfold name, or at least our version of it, in all four worlds, according to Bardon's idea and the Minutum Mundum. So, well, okay, so the Universal Master Key, we're going to give our thumbs up on this and say that if you're really into Bardon and you're going to actually do his magical mirror exercise, which I strongly recommend you do, along with your natal horoscope, and so we're going to give it a 5-star review, and we're going to say, yep, go ahead, bring it in, and we'll thank Dieter Ruggeberg for putting it together for us. And next week we're going to have a real treat for you. Till then, good magic.